They say hunger doesn't always look like empty plates. Sometimes, it looks like a kid pretending he's not hungry so his mom can eat instead. In a small diner, the world kept spinning, orders called out, spoons clinking, while one boy stood by a corner booth, watching a stranger's untouched bowl of soup. He hesitated, swallowed his pride, and whispered, "Sir, my mom's hungry. Can I take the leftover soup?" And the man he asked, Jasonstatham, looked up with eyes that had seen plenty of fights, but never one like this. And what he did next was nothing short of a miracle. Before we continue, I'd like to take a moment to thank you for being here with us. Every story we share is about more than what's seen. It's about kindness, courage, and those small choices that still matter in a world that often forgets them. If you enjoy stories that move your heart and remind you of the good that still exists, consider subscribing. It's free, it helps us grow, and it means you'll never miss another story like this one. The diner was the kind of place people forgot existed, the kind where time felt slower, where the smell of old coffee lingered longer than the customers. Rain tapped lazily against the window, making soft patterns down the glass as neon lights blinked outside. Jason sat in his usual booth, third from the window back corner. He liked this seat because it faced the door. Old habits die hard, and for a man who had spent years watching his back, the position of a chair could mean everything. He wasn't there for the food. Not really. It was just a quiet place to think, to be a face no one cared to recognize. He ordered a bowl of soup, something warm for the cold day, but barely touched it. Across the diner, a young boy stood near the counter, too small for his age, his clothes a size too big. His sneakers were soaked through. He clutched something in his hand, a crumpled note, maybe, or a few coins. His eyes darted between the waitress and his mother, who sat near the door, shivering under an old coat. No one paid them much attention. People rarely do. The waitress, tired but kind, offered the mother a small smile. "We're closing soon," she said softly, wiping the counter. The woman nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "I know, I'm sorry." The boy tugged at his mother's sleeve. She shook her head gently. But he didn't stop. He looked back at Jason's booth, at the half-eaten soup still steaming slightly. His lips trembled as he whispered something to his mom. She closed her eyes for a moment, like someone bracing for impact, then nodded weakly. The boy took a deep breath and walked toward Jason. His steps were slow, uncertain. He reached the edge of the table, clutching the back of the chair like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Jason looked up from his thoughts. Their eyes met. The boy's voice was small, smaller than the rain outside. "Sir," he said, "my mom's hungry. Can I take the leftover soup? Just one spoon." The diner went quiet. Even the hum of the old fridge seemed to fade. The few customers nearby turned slightly, pretending not to look. Jason blinked. For a second he didn't know what to say. He'd faced men twice his size in fights that left the ground trembling. But this tiny voice asking for a spoon of soup, hit harder than any punch. He looked at the boy, really looked. His cheeks were pale, his hands shaking slightly. Jason noticed the torn sleeves, the cold red knuckles. This wasn't just hunger, it was life worn thin. He spoke softly, "Where's your mom?" The boy pointed to the table near the door. She sat with her back straight, trying to look calm, but her eyes gave her away, full of exhaustion, guilt, and love all tangled together. Jason nodded once. "Come here." The boy hesitated. "Sir." Jason pushed the bowl toward him. "Take it, but not one spoon, the whole thing. Sit down." The boy's eyes widened. "Really?" Jason gave a small nod. "Really, and bring your mom too." The boy turned and ran back to the woman. She shook her head at first, embarrassed, whispering something about not wanting charity, but Jason could see her resolve breaking under the weight of her son's hope. Slowly, she stood and followed him. When they reached the booth, she kept her distance. "We're fine," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "He just gets curious sometimes." Jason gestured to the seat across from him. "Ma'am, it's just soup, please." For a moment pride and pain fought behind her tired eyes. Then, with a quiet exhale, she sat down. The boy climbed in beside her. The waitress noticed and walked over. "Everything all right here?" Jason nodded. "Can we get 2 more bowls of soup, please?" The woman turned quickly. "No, we..." But Jason interrupted gently. "It's cold out there. Let's warm up first." The waitress smiled knowingly and hurried off. The woman stared at Jason, unsure whether to thank him or refuse again. Jason broke the silence. "How long since you ate?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Yesterday morning." Jason nodded slowly. "And your boy?" She smiled faintly. "I let him have the last of the bread. Mothers always eat last, right?" Jason's expression softened. "Yeah," he murmured, "they do." The soup arrived. The smell filled the booth, rich, simple, comforting. The boy grabbed the spoon eagerly but paused when he saw his mother watching. She smiled at him. "Go on." Jason watched as the boy took the first bite. His eyes closed, savoring it like it was the best meal in the world. The woman, however, stared at her hands, her fingers twisting nervously. Jason spoke again, voice low. "You from around here?" "Used to be," she said. "Lost the apartment 2 months ago. My husband," she stopped, her throat tightened. "He's gone." Jason didn't push. Some wounds didn't need reopening. "I clean houses when I can," she continued. "Sometimes people are kind. Most times they're not, but I tell my boy it'll get better." She smiled sadly. "It has to, right?" Jason looked at the little boy, now quietly scraping the bowl clean. "What's his name?" "Eli." Jason nodded. "He's a good kid." She smiled. "Too good for this world." The waitress brought 2 more bowls. "On the house," she said softly. "Kitchen's closing and we've got extras." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." Jason waited until the waitress left, then pushed his wallet forward on the table. He pulled out a few bills, enough for far more than soup. The woman's eyes widened. "No, please, I can't take that." Jason shook his head. "It's not charity, it's help. There's a difference." She hesitated. "You don't even know us." Jason looked out the window, rain streaking the glass like tears. "I don't need to. Sometimes you help because you remember what it felt like to need help and not get it." Her lips trembled. She reached across the table, touching the edge of the bills with shaking fingers. "Thank you," she whispered. Jason nodded once quietly. After they finished eating, the boy looked up shyly. "Sir, are you a soldier?" Jason paused. "Why do you ask?" The boy pointed at his posture, his tone, his calmness. "You sit like my uncle used to. He was in the army." Jason smiled faintly. "Something like that." "Did you ever get scared?" the boy asked. Jason thought for a moment. "Every day, but being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you still do what needs to be done." The boy nodded thoughtfully. "Like when I asked for soup." Jason chuckled softly. "Exactly like that." The woman smiled for the first time that night. "He's got courage, I'll give him that." Jason leaned back in his chair. "He's got more than courage, he's got heart." The diner grew quiet again as the last customers left. The waitress wiped down the tables, humming softly to herself. The rain outside had turned into a steady drizzle. The woman checked the clock and stood. "We should go," she said softly. "We don't want to take up space." Jason stood too. "You're not taking up anything, but where are you headed?" She hesitated. "There's a shelter downtown if it's not full." Jason frowned. "Not safe this late, I'll give you a ride." She shook her head quickly. "No, we can't, you've done enough." Jason's voice softened. "I insist, I'll make sure you both get there." Her eyes glistened again. "You don't have to." "I know," Jason interrupted, "but I want to." As they stepped outside, the cold air bit through their clothes. Jason opened his car door for them, helping the boy inside first. The woman hesitated again, then whispered, "You don't meet many good men anymore." Jason glanced at her, his voice quiet. "You'd be surprised. Sometimes good men just stay quiet." They drove through the wet streets, the city lights reflecting off puddles like broken stars. The boy, full and drowsy, leaned against his mother, holding her hand. Jason kept his eyes on the road, but his thoughts were elsewhere, on the faces he'd seen before, on promises made and broken, on kindness lost and found again. When they reached the shelter, the woman turned to him. "I don't know how to thank you." Jason smiled faintly. "You already did, just keep going." She hesitated, then asked, "Will we see you again?" Jason looked at her for a moment, then at the boy sleeping in her arms. "Maybe," he said, "but I think you'll be just fine." She nodded, tears glimmering in the dim streetlight. "God bless you." Jason waited until they were safely inside before driving off. Back at the diner, the waitress was locking up when Jason returned. "Forgot something?" she asked. Jason placed a folded envelope on the counter. "For them," he said, "if they come back." The waitress nodded slowly, understanding. "You're a good man, sir." Jason looked toward the window where the rain still whispered against the glass. "Just someone who knows what hunger feels like," he said quietly. He turned and walked out into the night, coat collar up, footsteps fading into the sound of rain, leaving behind nothing but a small act of kindness that would ripple farther than he'd ever know. The next morning came quietly. Rain had stopped, leaving the streets shining like mirrors, and the world carried on as if nothing had happened. But for the boy and his mother, that night in the diner changed everything. Inside the shelter, warmth replaced fear. The woman Claire hadn't slept in a real bed for weeks. She woke early, checking that her son, Eli, was still tucked under the blanket. He was sleeping peacefully, clutching a napkin folded neatly in his hand. She pulled it away gently and saw the handwriting. It wasn't much, just a few words written in careful print. "Keep your head up, you're stronger than you think." There was no name, just a small signature that looked more like initials, J.S. Claire smiled faintly, a tear rolling down her cheek. She didn't need to ask who wrote it. Across the city, Jason sat in his car at a red light, a cup of coffee in hand. He wasn't thinking about fame, movies, or interviews. He was thinking about that boy's voice, soft, steady, asking for leftover soup. It wasn't the first time he'd seen hunger, but something about this one stayed with him. Maybe it was how the boy asked not for himself, but for his mother. Maybe it was the way she tried to hide her pride behind tired eyes. He pulled over by the side of the road and stared at the rain-specked windshield. His reflection looked older, worn by years of doing what the world asked, acting, pretending, surviving. But last night reminded him of something simple, the kind of strength that doesn't need a spotlight. A week passed, the world spun on. Jason went back to filming, the usual chaos of lights and scripts, but something gnawed at him. He started noticing things: a homeless man outside a cafe, a mother counting coins at a grocery till, a child watching food through a bakery window. It wasn't new, it had always been there. He just hadn't been looking hard enough. One afternoon, during a break in filming, he slipped away quietly. He found himself walking down the same block as the diner, the same smell of coffee, the same neon light flickering above the window. Inside, the waitress recognized him immediately. "You again," she said, smiling. "The quiet man who leaves envelopes." Jason gave a half-smile. "They come back." She nodded. "Couple of times. I gave them what you left. The boy said to tell you thank you and that he's been brave." Jason's chest tightened. "He said that?" "Word for word." He nodded slowly, staring at the booth where they'd sat. "Good kid," he said softly. Later that evening, Jason was walking toward his car when he saw something near the alley, a small figure bent over a trash bin. He froze for a second. The boy. "Eli." The boy looked up, startled. "Sir." Jason approached slowly. "What are you doing here?" The boy held up a plastic bag. "Mom's working. She cleans the diner now. I was getting cans for recycling for a little extra." Jason frowned, then crouched down. "You don't need to do that." The boy shrugged. "I don't mind. Mom says we're lucky now. We have a room." Jason smiled faintly. "Lucky, huh?" "Yeah," Eli said, smiling back. "She says people can be good if you look long enough." Jason's eyes softened. "Your mom's right." He looked at the bag of cans, then back at the boy. "How about I give you a better deal?" The boy tilted his head. "A deal?" Jason nodded. "You help me out sometimes, small stuff. In return, I'll make sure you and your mom never have to dig through bins again." Eli frowned. "What kind of stuff?" Jason smiled. "Honest stuff. Helping at the gym, cleaning up, keeping things tidy. You can handle that." Eli grinned. "Yes, sir." Jason extended his hand. "Then it's a deal." They shook hands, a tiny palm gripping a much larger one, sealing a promise that neither fully understood yet. Weeks turned into months. Eli began showing up at Jason's gym every weekend. He swept floors, stacked towels, and listened to Jason's quiet advice about discipline and respect. Sometimes, Jason taught him small things, how to stay calm under pressure, how to stand tall even when you're scared. One afternoon, as Eli was cleaning near the punching bags, Jason asked, "How's your mom doing?" Eli beamed. "She's saving up. We're gonna move to a small apartment soon. She says it's the first step." Jason nodded approvingly. "That's good, you proud of her?" Eli looked puzzled. "Shouldn't she be proud of me?" Jason smiled. "She is, but sometimes it's good to tell her you're proud too." Eli thought for a moment, then nodded seriously. "I'll tell her tonight." But life, as it often does, had its turns. One night Jason was locking up when his phone buzzed. It was the waitress from the diner. Her voice trembled. "Jason, it's the boy. Something happened." Jason's heart dropped. "What?" His mom collapsed. They said exhaustion, maybe more. He's at the hospital. Within minutes, Jason was there. The corridors smelled like bleach and sadness. He found Eli sitting alone on a bench, eyes red but holding back tears. Jason knelt beside him. "Hey, champ." Eli looked up. "They said she needs an operation, but they don't know if she can afford it." Jason didn't say a word. He just stood, walked to the reception desk and took out his wallet. "How much?" The nurse looked startled. "Sir." Jason's tone left no room for discussion. "How much?" When she told him, he nodded, pulled out his card and paid without another word. Back on the bench, Eli looked up confused. "Sir, what did you do?" Jason sat beside him. "I just made sure your mom gets the help she needs." Eli blinked, his voice small. "Why?" Jason looked at him for a long moment. "Because once, someone helped me when I didn't deserve it, and I promised I'd do the same when it was my turn." The boy didn't know what to say. He leaned against Jason, silent. And for the first time since that diner night, Jason put his arm around someone like family. Days passed. Claire recovered slowly. When she opened her eyes and saw Jason by the door, she smiled weakly. "You again," she whispered. Jason smiled back. "You've got a tough kid." She laughed softly. "He gets that from his dad." Then, after a pause, "And maybe from you." Jason nodded once. "You rest now, the hard part's over." She reached out a trembling hand. "Thank you. You've done more than we could ever repay." Jason took her hand gently. "Just promise me one thing: when you're back on your feet, help someone else. That's how this works." She smiled faintly. "Deal." Months later, the diner was busy again. The neon lights still flickered, but now the woman behind the counter wasn't just a waitress, it was Claire. She'd gotten the job full-time. Her son sat at the corner booth doing homework, a small bowl of soup beside him. Jason walked in quietly one afternoon. The bell above the door chimed. Claire turned, her eyes lighting up. "You kept your promise," she said. Jason smiled. "So did you." She poured him a coffee. "Your usual." He nodded. "You remembered." "How could I forget?" she said. "You changed our lives." Jason leaned back in the booth. "You did that yourself. I just gave you a little push." At that moment, Eli ran over, proudly holding out his school report. "I got top marks." Jason grinned, taking the paper. "Look at that, knew you would." Eli blushed. "We saved you some soup, sir, the same kind you gave us." Jason smiled softly. "Then I guess it's my turn to eat." They sat together, three people bound not by blood, but by compassion. Outside, life moved on as it always did: cars, crowds, noise. But inside that small diner, time seemed to pause. There was laughter, warmth, and something more powerful than words: understanding. And as Jason took the first spoonful of soup, the same kind he'd once given away, he realized something simple but profound. Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness doesn't just feed the hungry. It reminds the world what being human really means.